I'm joined now by Hilda Fogelson, who fled Nazi Germany with her two sisters as part of the Kindertransport. She eventually settled in the Los Angeles area, majoring in international relations at UCLA and becoming an inner-city school teacher. She still travels the world to speak about her experiences as one of the Kinder. Hilda Fogelson, welcome to LA Theater Works.
Thank you.
Where did you grow up, and what did your parents do for a living?
I grew up in Berlin, Germany, and my father owned his own business. He manufactured men's clothing, and my mother was just a stay-at-home mother, and we had a pretty good life when I was a little kid.
And what was your neighborhood like? Did you have non-Jewish friends growing up?
Well, in my house, it was an apartment house, and my dad owned that house, but we lived on the first floor. On the second floor lived a Gentile family, a judge and his wife, and they had a little daughter the same age as me.
And were you friends?
We were friends till the Nazis came.
Exactly. And how old were you when things first started getting uncomfortable?
Well, I'm born in 1926, and Hitler came to power in 1933, and already starting then, different laws were passed, against the Jews.
And were you, as a 7-year-old, aware of what was happening?
Not that much, maybe when I was 7, but when I would say 10, and I remember things like going with my cousin on a walk. She was older, and they lived across the street, and we would see these Nazis parading with their swastika flag, and you were supposed to stop and salute the flag. And she told me, we don't do that because we're Jewish. And she said, so let's just hide in the doorway here. And, I was just a little kid. I did whatever she told me. And then we went home, and I didn't see a visitor in our house. And I just said to my mom, guess what I did? I didn't salute the Nazis. And then my mother got very upset because this man was there, and actually they had hired him. He was a tutor to help me pass an exam to get into the public school, because already they weren't really letting Jewish kids in, so they wanted me to score high, kind of like the SAT here. So that was the first time I realized you better watch what you say, But that man was nice. He didn't report me or anything.
And did you go to this school, a public school?
No, I passed that exam with very high marks, and everybody was very proud of me, just 10 years old. And then I got a letter because of my Jewish faith. I couldn't go to that school.
And so where did you end up going to school?
Then they had... because I wasn't the only kid that happened to, and they had many Jewish schools that opened up.
And were you able to attend synagogue, or did your family have to worship in private after a certain period of time?
No, my dad, actually, the synagogue was not far from where we lived. A beautiful synagogue, was burned during the Kristallnacht. But actually, it was what they call liberal, which is like reform. But it wasn't reform, what I know now, where I belong now. And men sat downstairs and women upstairs. But my father would always take me in with him downstairs.
When did old friends start treating your family differently?
Well, I think almost right away, when all of this happened, especially Kristallnacht, I guess.
Which took place in 1938,
38 on November the 9th.
So you were, at that point, 12 years old.
Right.
Yeah. So were you a first-hand witness to Kristallnacht? the night of the broken glass?
Yes, by that time I already went to the Jewish school, and the one I went to was quite a ways from my home. I had to go on the subway and an elevated train, and then we walked to get there. But already when we got on the train, I could see the synagogue burning from the window. And, I think by that time my sisters were already going to that school too. And there was a teacher on the train, and we thought, oh my God, what happened now? And then as the train went on, we saw more and more things destroyed, and we got to the school, and the principal met us, or we called her the director, I guess, like a principal, and she said, something terrible happened, and you can't stay here, and you have to go home. We turned around, we went home, really not quite getting it, what really had happened. And then we got home, and which was very unusual, my father was home, because, he would usually be at work. And he told us we should all sit down, we shouldn't get upset, but something terrible happened, and he told us, how the synagogues had been burned, how the businesses had been broken into. That's why it's called Kristallnacht, crystal for the glass.
Your father's thinking, we've got to get out of here. It's 1938. When did your family hear about the Kindertransport, and what did it take to get you and your sisters on the list?
Well, I think by that time we had some distant relative, and he knew about it. My father had to pay for each one of us 50 pounds, which, doesn't sound a lot, but at that time it was. We got registered, and luckily we got on that.
How did your parents tell you that you were going away? And do you remember how you felt knowing you were going to be separated from your family and your home?
Yeah, that was hard, but on the other hand, I was happy to get out of there. My older sister, she's alive now. She tells me always she was so happy because she really wanted to go to Palestine. She wanted to do anything to get out because she suffered more as a teenager. I was more like a little kid. We weren't as grown up as my children here, when they were teenagers. Oh, I see my grandchildren.
What do you remember about the trip from Berlin to London?
I remember at first a whole lot of, pretty chaotic, because you can imagine very little kids, they didn't know what was going on. Not that I knew exactly either, but I was a little older. And I know that a father came running up to us. He had a really little kid, and he said, she's going with you. We never saw them before, but he just saw my sister was older. And I remember holding this kid's hand. I don't really know whatever happened to her, and we just got her on the train with us.
And where did you finally end up? Did you know any English when you arrived?
No, we did have some private lessons at home to prepare us, but I really didn't know any English. You just, it's amazing you learn it.
Yeah, you do. And so you and your sisters, the train arrives at the station. Where was it?
Well, first we went to, I think it was Bremen in Germany, and then we got on a boat first. And then the boat went to Southampton, and then Southampton, two cousins met us who were older than we are, and we thought it was very nice. They were like in their 20s, I think, and then they took us to my uncle in London.
Many of the Kinder never saw their families again, but you were fortunate to reunite with your family.
I was one of the very few.
How long were you separated from them, and when you first saw them again, what was that like?
Well, at first, you're kind of in shock, I think. You don't really know what's happening now. And my folks always said, my father especially said, we're going to see each other again. And I believed him. At first I thought he's kidding, of course. But it was true. We did see each other again. And
So you were separated for what, 2 years or 3 years? And
maybe 6 months.
oh, just
like,
6 months. Yeah. Well, that was very fortunate.
Yeah, 80% of the kinder never saw their parents again.
Right.
And I'm one of the 20%.
Why did you end up in Southern California, and what kind of culture shock was that? When did they decide to leave for Los Angeles?
Well, because my father's brothers had settled in Beverly Hills. And I know when we arrived this was during the war, we arrived in Boston, and then we went on a Greyhound bus all across the United States. My father thought that would be a great idea. We'll see the United States. We might never get to travel. But it was a pretty horrendous trip on a bus all the time.
And when was that?
That was in 1940.
To get to America, you took a ship?
Yeah, a boat.
Wasn't that quite dangerous in 1940 to get on a boat?
That was very dangerous because it was the war.
Yeah.
And it was a convoy. And I think there were 64 ships. Above us were two like helicopters, and then 2 destroyers. And all these ships were close together because we already saw torpedoes. We saw them come really close. And I saw several ships sink. They just collapsed, And then we were on a very little ship, too. It was not like you think now, the big ocean liners. It was just more like a merchant vessel. Oh, and then besides me, there were English children who were sent to Canada. Just kind of like what happened to me, only now the parents got them out of England because of the war.
And why did your father decide to go to Los Angeles and brave that dangerous trip across the Atlantic rather than stay in England until the war was over? What was his thinking?
First of all, I don't think we had a visa to stay in England. We were just visitors. And then his brothers lived here, and he wanted to he thought he could start a business like he had, which he didn't do. He bought a chicken ranch, my dad.
When you came to America, were you able to tell people about what had happened to you, or was it just too painful to talk about?
No, I really remember being in Van Nuys High School, and nobody knew anything about what was going on there. There were no Jewish kids in Van Nuys. I was the only Jewish girl in the whole high school, and there was another boy. He was Jewish, too. And they couldn't understand when I told them what was happening in Europe. And at first, that was very hard for me. What is with these people? Don't they know anything? Don't they? We didn't have television, but we had newsreels. And I know I went to Hollywood with my dad, and there was a theater. All they showed was newsreels, and they showed the war.
And so what was the kids' reaction when you told them about this? Were they...
They thought I was really weird, I think. But I also fit in very well. I had a lot of friends, and I always was good in sports. I did a lot of that. And but I had no Jewish friends, which my father was very worried about.
Can you tell us your reaction to the play, Kindertransport? Do you think it realistically captured at least some part of what you went through or what other children you knew went through?
Yeah, I think it was very well done. I remember sitting and crying watching that because it sort of comes back to you when you see all that. The girl having to leave her parents. And yeah, I think it was very well done, very much the way It really was. Of course, everyone has a different experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting and very particularly sad twist in that play, of course, is that the mother does manage to survive.
Yeah.
Probably because she so wanted to see that child again. And
Right.
then the child, has moved on and basically rejects her.
I think that happened quite often. They thought, why did you send me away? If you're very young, that's all these young kids thought. I know I've been very fortunate and lucky because my parents came not too much later, and I always had a big family around me, cousins, uncles, aunts.
You've traveled around the world telling people about your experience as a kinder. What groups have you spoken to, and what kind of reactions do audiences have to your story?
Well, mainly I've gone back to Berlin because they invited me. I've gone several times and given talks at the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And high school kids come there. They feel very guilty, but I say, I'm very happy that you're here and that you see me. There are some of us who survived.
Well, Hilda Fogelson, thank you so much for sharing stories about your remarkable life with us today.
And thank you. I think it's great that you do it, and the more people know about it, the better.
I've been speaking with Hilda Fogelson, a Kindertransport survivor.